What would you do? I mean, if you woke up tomorrow in your childhood bedroom,
Oh, man.
like realizing you had your entire adult mind, all of your memories, and this absolute terrifying knowledge of the exact date the world was going to end.
It's the ultimate combination of nostalgia and just absolute horror.
Right.
You are back in the safest place you've ever known, but you are carrying literally the most dangerous information in human history.
It's a heavy burden. But welcome to Under the Hood, the signature analysis program from Chesterton Radio.
Glad to be here.
I'm your host, and today we are broadcasting to you from the little station on Commercial Street in Atchison, Kansas.
The best place to be.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And I want you to picture the scene here with us. We've got this sturdy oak table, the microphones are live, the coffee is hot, and we are just, driving deep into the stories behind the stories.
And this particular deep dive is totally custom tailored for you, the listener.
Yeah.
We're taking a sprawling landscape of classic radio, literature, history, philosophy, and faith, and we are connecting the dots.
So you don't just know what happened, but really why it matters today.
Exactly.
So today's mission revolves around a 1947 science fiction masterpiece. We are dissecting H. Bean Piper's brilliant and honestly kind of haunting short story, Time and Time Again.
It's such a classic.
It really is. And we're going to focus specifically on its legendary adaptation by the classic NBC radio program X-1.
But before we get into it, we need to issue a very warm but very firm spoiler warning.
Good call.
Yeah, we are going to dissect this story totally down to the studs, which means the ending, the twists, all of it will all be revealed.
Nothing is held back today.
Right. So if you haven't heard the original NBC X-1 broadcasts of Time and Time Again, do yourself a massive favor, hit pause on us, go listen to that half hour of incredible radio drama, and just come right back to the table. We'll be right here.
We're not going anywhere.
Yeah.
But, okay, let's unpack this setup, because I think it is one of the most visceral, inciting incidents in all of Golden Age science fiction.
Oh, without a doubt.
The year's 1975, World War III is raging, and we follow Captain Alan Hartley, who is mortally wounded during this massive conflict called the Battle of Buffalo.
Yeah, right in upstate New York.
Yeah. And as he lies dying in the mud, with medics just screaming all around him, he receives a narcotic injection. And everything just fades to black.
But he doesn't die.
Right. Instead of dying or waking up in some field hospital, he wakes up in his own 13-year-old body.
On his birthday, no less.
On his birthday, in the year 1945. And he remembers absolutely everything.
It is a stunning transition. It really is. But, to understand the weight of that moment, we really have to look at the architect of this whole universe, H. Beam Piper.
Right. Let's talk about Piper.
Because Piper was born in 1904 in Altoona, Pennsylvania, and he was a man deeply, deeply obsessed with history.
Which is funny for a sci-fi writer, right?
Yeah, but in fact, Time and Time Again was his very first published short story. It appeared in Astounding Science Fiction in April 1947.
Which was basically the epicenter of science fiction at the time.
Yeah, completely.
Like, under the editorship of John W. Campbell, if you were published there, you were literally shaping the cultural imagination of the era.
Precisely.
Yeah.
Because Campbell was demanding harder, more thoughtful science fiction, and Piper just delivered.
He knocked it out of the park.
He did. From his very first story, you can see the themes that would basically dominate his entire career. Piper was fascinated by the idea that history just repeats itself.
Cyclical history.
Right. He didn't just write one-off stories. He built these massive sweeping frameworks, like, for example, his Terra-Human Future History.
Oh, yeah, the Terra-Human timeline. That stuff is wild.
It detailed the next 6,000 years of human civilization. He mapped out everything, starting from 1942, which was the year the first fission reactor was built.
Okay.
And in his timeline, a nuclear war devastates the planet in 1973.
Which is chillingly close to the 1975 World War III he predicts. And Time Again.
Exactly. He had a very specific vision of where we were headed. He also created the Paratime series, which dealt with this law enforcement outfit from a parallel world that policed alternate timelines.
So he was always playing with history and time.
Yeah. He loved taking historical events and projecting them into the future.
Yeah.
Like, he based his novel Euler Uprising on the historical Sepoy Mutiny of 1857.
Really? I didn't know that.
Yeah, and in Space Viking, the takeover of a planet explicitly mirrors the rise of Adolf Hitler. Piper really believed that past events have direct, clear analogs in the future, because human nature, Well, it just doesn't change.
But, I have to push back here, or at least pause for a second, because the gap between his fiction and his reality is just staggering to me.
It is tragic.
It is. We have this author who is a master of envisioning vast, interconnected futures. His characters are these hyper-competent heroes who fight desperately to save civilization.
Right, they never give up.
Yeah, they refuse to give up even when the timeline itself is against them. Yet, Piper's own life ended in profound tragedy.
It is one of the great tragedies of the genre, honestly. By 1964, Piper was struggling with really severe personal and financial
It
difficulties.
was a bad time for him.
Awful. His agent had died, he wrongly believed his career was totally over, and he was completely broke. And Piper was fiercely independent, a staunch libertarian, and he absolutely refused to ask anyone for financial help or charity.
I read about what he did, and it's heartbreakingly methodical.
Yeah.
He shut off the utilities in his apartment, put painter's drop cloths over the walls and floor, and took his own life with a handgun from his extensive collection.
His suicide note just perfectly captures that tragic pragmatism. He wrote, let me find it. He wrote, "I don't like to leave messes when I go away, but if I could have cleaned up any of this mess, I wouldn't be going away."
Wow. Just wow. Knowing the sheer despair he must have felt, how does that change the way we read Alan Hartley?
It changes everything.
Because Alan is a protagonist, fighting with everything he has for a better future, scratching and clawing to save humanity, while his creator eventually felt he had no future left at all. It feels almost like Piper poured all of his remaining hope into his characters.
I think that's a very perceptive read. Piper gave his characters the agency to change the world, an agency he perhaps felt he had entirely lost in his own life.
Yeah, that makes sense.
He gave Alan Hartley the ultimate second chance, a chance to clean up the mess of the world before it even happened. And I think that resonates deeply with audiences.
It's definitely why this story endured.
Exactly. It's why it was adapted not once, but twice for national radio. First for Dimension X in 1951, and then reproduced for the legendary X-1 in 1956.
We really need to talk about X-1 for a second, because if you are a fan of audio storytelling, this show is the gold standard.
It really is.
NBC ran it from 1955 to 1958, and it was a pioneer in adult, serious science fiction.
Right. They weren't doing Flash Gordon serials for kids. They were adapting the absolute giants of the field.
Robert Heinlein, Isaac Asimov.
Ray Bradbury, Philip K. Dick. They took the intellectual rigor of magazines like Astounding and translated it into a sonic medium with incredibly high production values.
And the adaptation of Piper's story was handled by Ernest Kinoy, one of their main staff writers.
A genius.
If you look at the transcript, or better yet, if you put on a good pair of headphones and listen to the broadcast, the audio design is just a masterclass in pacing and Foley art.
It doesn't ease you in at all.
No. It drops you right into the meat grinder.
Yes, that opening sequence of the 1975 Battle of Buffalo. The sound design there is chaotic, it's layered, it's suffocating.
You hear the relentless roar of napalm throwers.
And the terrifying shrieks of guided munitions exploding, plus the medics shouting over the din. The dialogue is so desperate.
Hey, come on, back it in here. Look out, it's lousy with mud.
Exactly. You hear the hurried clinical sorting of the wounded. This one must have been 1,000 yards in. Get his dog tag out. It is pure, unadulterated war.
And then just complete silence.
Wow.
Or rather, the sudden jarring quiet of a 1945 domestic morning.
The contrast is amazing.
You hear birds chirping, the hum of a lawnmower, his dad telling him to come down for breakfast. As a listener, you feel that whiplash in your bones.
Kinoy uses that sudden drop in decibels to place you right inside Alan's disoriented mind. You don't just hear the time travel, you feel the psychological shock of it.
That transition is brilliant because it grounds the science fiction in intense psychological realism. It makes the impossible feel incredibly tangible.
Which brings us to the actual setting of that war Alan is fighting. Let's look at the Battle of Buffalo.
Right, because when Alan wakes up in 1945, he brings the terrors of 1975 with him. But I want to pause on the jargon for a second.
Sure.
In the story, Alan says he's an officer in G5 scientific warfare. He's checking on combat equipment lubricants when a guided 98 bomb hits.
Yeah.
In 1947, when Piper wrote this, what did that terminology actually mean to a reader? Because it sounds almost retro-futuristic to us today.
Well, to a reader in 1947, those terms weren't retro. They were bleeding-edge nightmares.
Really?
Oh, yeah. Scientific warfare was a very specific, terrifying concept post-Manhattan Project. In World War II, warfare shifted from purely industrial attrition to applied science.
Right, like the atomic bomb.
The atomic bomb, radar, the V-2 rockets developed by Wernher von Braun, these were triumphs of scientific warfare.
So it's fresh in everyone's mind.
Very fresh. When Piper writes about a guided 98 bomb, he is extrapolating from the very recent, very real V-2 rocket attacks on London. He's taking the primitive guidance systems of 1945 and predicting a future where munitions are smart, relentless, and basically inescapable.
So he isn't inventing alien invaders with laser beams. He's just weaponizing the daily headlines.
Exactly.
He's looking at the trajectory of military technology and just pressing fast forward.
And we have to remember the intense geopolitical dread of 1947. This was the exact year President Harry S. Truman declared the Truman Doctrine.
Ah, right. The policy of containment was born.
Yes. The United States and the Soviet Union, who had been uneasy allies during the Second World War, were suddenly drawing lines in the sand. Winston Churchill had just delivered his famous Iron Curtain speech at Fulton, Missouri in 1946.
I remember reading about the reaction to that speech. Stalin was furious.
Completely enraged.
He literally compared Churchill to Hitler in the Soviet press, claiming it was a call for war against the USSR. The world had just stopped burning, and immediately the two biggest guys left in the room were reaching for matches again.
The tension was escalating rapidly. The U.S. was demanding the Soviets withdraw from Iran. There were border disputes in Turkey, a civil war in Greece.
There's a global powder keg.
Truman asked Congress for $400 million to intervene, framing it as an existential contest between free peoples and totalitarian regimes.
And didn't George Orwell actually coin the term Cold War around then?
He did, in an essay in October 1945, right after the atomic bombs were dropped. Orwell looked at the absolute destructive power of nuclear weapons and predicted a world living under the permanent threat of annihilation, a permanent Cold War between unconquerable superstates.
So when Piper sits down at his typewriter, the society he's living in is terrified that Hiroshima and Nagasaki weren't the end of a war, but the prologue to the next one.
That was a very common fear.
Piper looks at that fear and says, yes, you are right to be afraid. In Alan Hartley's 1975 reality, Ottawa has fallen to a transpolar invasion. Buffalo, New York is under siege. It's a domestic apocalypse.
It reflects the absolute certainty of the era that civilization was actively building the tools for its own destruction. The arms race was just beginning.
Yeah, in our real timeline, the USSR tested its first nuclear weapon in 1949, catching the U.S. off guard.
But the fear that they would get the bomb was already palpable in 1947. Piper is capturing the zeitgeist of a society holding its breath.
I want you, the listener, to think about Alan's memories of 1975 like a ghost story.
Ooh, I like that analogy.
But it's not a supernatural ghost story. The ghost isn't a phantom or a demon. The ghost is human ingenuity gone wrong. It's the specter of what we are capable of doing to ourselves.
Right.
Alan is haunted by a future that his own species is deliberately engineering.
That is a profound way to look at it. He is haunted by human potential applied to destruction. And I think that transitions us perfectly into the actual mechanics of how Alan experiences this haunting.
Because, as we noted, there is no time machine here.
Right. How does a 43-year-old mind end up in a 13-year-old body?
I want to pivot to the actual time travel, because it breaks my brain a little bit. Piper doesn't use a shiny chrome DeLorean or a brass contraption with quartz dials. He uses consciousness.
In the original text, Alan has to sit down and logically theorize what happened to him. Remember, he is a man of science.
Right.
He references real-world thinkers, specifically J.N.M. Tyrrell, who was a British mathematician and parapsychologist, and J.W. Dunn, an aeronautical engineer who wrote a massively influential book in 1927 called An Experiment with Time.
Okay, let's pause and unpack J.W. Dunn. Because I know his theories influenced a lot of writers back then, people like J.R.R. Tolkien and C.S. Lewis. What exactly was Dunn's theory of time?
Well, Dunn experienced precognitive dreams.
Like dreaming the future.
Yes. Most famously, in 1902, he dreamed of a volcanic island exploding and killing thousands of people. Days later, he received a newspaper detailing the catastrophic eruption of Mount Pelée in Martinique.
That is wild.
Dunn, being an engineer, tried to create a mathematical and philosophical framework to explain how he could remember the future. He proposed something called serial time.
Serial time. Okay, how does that work in layman's terms?
Dunn argued that time is not a flowing river that we are being swept down. Instead, time is totally present and static. Every moment of your life, past, present, and future, exists simultaneously, just at different coordinates in a higher dimension.
Let me see if I have this right. It's like a vinyl record.
Okay, go with that.
The entire song exists on the record at all times. The intro, the chorus, the outro, they are all physically there in the grooves. Our consciousness is just the needle playing the record. We only perceive the music as flowing sequentially because the needle is moving along the track.
That is a brilliant analogy, yes. Your physical body and your physical brain exist at every moment along your lifespan, just like the grooves on the record. It is only your observing consciousness, the needle, that moves.
So if the whole song is there, why don't we remember the end of the song while we are listening to the intro?
Because of what Piper terms the subconscious barrier.
Right.
Under normal circumstances, that barrier keeps your consciousness locked into perceiving one moment at a time.
Okay.
And you only have access to the memories that are physically stored in your brain at that specific chronological moment. You wake up remembering yesterday because the neurological pathways for yesterday's memories have been forged in your physical brain.
But the future hasn't been written into the meat of your brain yet.
Exactly.
So what was the anomaly for Alan? How did the needle jump back to the start of the record, carrying the music from the end of the track with it?
Alan theorizes it was a catastrophic, totally unrepeatable combination of factors. The intense radiation from the atomic blast of the guided 98, the extreme physical trauma of his mortal injuries, and the specific chemical composition of the narcotic injection he was given.
That's quite the cocktail.
Yeah. Together, they acted like a massive jolt that shattered that subconscious barrier. His 43-year-old observing consciousness was ripped violently back along the timeline and deposited into his 13-year-old brain.
Wow.
And because the barrier was destroyed, all those future memories flooded in, completely bypassing the physical limitations of his teenage brain.
It's an incredible sci-fi premise. But think about the massive psychological burden of that. I want you, the listener, to put yourself in Alan's shoes for a second.
It's horrifying.
Imagine being 13 years old. You were sitting at the breakfast table, your mom is making eggs, your dad is reading the paper. And inside your head, you have the vivid sensory memories of burning to death in a war that won't happen for 30 years.
You know exactly how many millions of people are going to die.
And you can't tell anyone because you are a child.
The profound isolation of that is just staggering. And the radio adaptation captures this isolation beautifully in the scenes between Alan and his father, Blake Hartley.
All those scenes are gut-wrenching. Alan is desperate. He tries to explain to his dad that he died in the Third World War in 1975. And Blake, who is a good, rational, loving father, just dismisses it completely.
He thinks he's comforting him.
Yeah, he tries to comfort his son, telling him it was just a vivid nightmare.
Right. Blake says, you picked up something listening to the radio. All the commentators have been going on about another war after this one. You just got an undigested hunk of H.V. Kaltenborn raising hell in your subconscious.
H.V. Kaltenborn. Now, that's a name that dates the piece, but it was incredibly resonant for the audience back then.
Absolutely. H.V. Kaltenborn was one of the most famous, serious radio news commentators of the era. He was known for his highly opinionated, sometimes alarmist broadcasts about international affairs.
So from the father's perspective, this is a perfectly logical, rational explanation.
Totally. His kid has been listening to the news, internalized the atomic anxiety of the adult world, and had a nightmare. Why on earth would he believe his son is a time traveler? Blake even starts to worry that his son is having a psychotic break, or that his mind has been taken over by some outsider.
And Alan just has to sit there and carry this weight. He remembers the future. He knows his father will live to be 78, still hunting and flying a plane in 1975, right before Alan leaves for the front.
He loves his father.
He does. But he has to convince the man he loves most in the world that he isn't insane. Isn't this basically the ultimate curse of Cassandra from Greek myth?
It is the exact Cassandra dilemma. In mythology, Apollo gave Cassandra the gift of perfect prophecy, but when she rejected him, he cursed her so that no one would ever believe her warnings.
She knew Troy would fall, but she had to watch it happen, completely powerless to stop it.
Exactly. Alan knows Buffalo will burn. He knows the world will end. And his own father thinks he needs a psychiatrist.
How terrifying must it be to carry the weight of billions of future lives in the body of a 13-year-old boy? How do you even begin to have that conversation without getting locked up in an asylum?
You don't do it with words, you do it with proof. Alan doesn't succumb to the loneliness. He realizes he has to break the Cassandra curse if he wants to survive and actually change anything.
And that leads to the turning point, August 14th, 1945.
Yes. Alan tells his father to go to the store and make sure they have plenty of groceries because everything in town is going to close up tight.
He gets very specific.
He predicts, with chilling precision, that the official announcement of the Japanese surrender will happen at exactly 7:01 p.m. on Tuesday, August 14th.
And they sit there by the radio. The tension in that scene is incredible. The clock ticks down, and then exactly to the second Alan predicted, the announcement comes through.
It's a great moment.
And in that moment, Blake Hartley looks at his 13-year-old son and realizes the boy is telling the absolute truth.
And once his father believes him, the entire tone of the story shifts. The isolation is broken.
He's not alone anymore.
Right. Alan is no longer a victim trapped by time. He is a man with an ally. He realizes he has a moral responsibility.
Okay, so the dad believes him. What now? He broke the Cassandra curse, but does it actually mean he can change anything?
That's the big question.
Or is he just going to have to watch the world burn again, but this time with his dad knowing it's coming? This brings us to the Chestertonian themes of this deep dive. Hope versus fatalism, providence, and free will.
This is really the philosophical crux of the story. Piper is exploring a deep mystery regarding determinism. Alan knows the future, but the question is history a fixed track?
Right. Are they doomed to repeat the exact same timeline, or does humanity have the free will to alter its destiny?
And to test this, Alan orchestrates what is known in the story as the Frank Gutschall incident. Let's break that down because it's fascinating.
Yeah, walk us through it.
In Alan's original timeline, a local man named Frank Gutschall borrowed a .38 revolver from Alan's father and used it to commit a horrific murder-suicide.
Awful.
Alan remembers this vividly. So in this new timeline, Alan decides to manipulate events. He casually mentions to his father that Gutschall has been acting strange, talking wildly about his wife and looking unhinged.
And plants the seed.
Exactly. As a result of this new information, Alan's father informs the police. Gutschall is placed in a padded cell for observation before he ever gets his hands on the gun. The tragedy is prevented.
But wait, I have to challenge this. Is he actually proving free will? Or is his intervention just part of a larger deterministic loop that was always supposed to happen?
The classic paradox.
Right. If he only knows to save Gutschall because he remembers the future, isn't the future still dictating his present actions?
That is the classic grandfather paradox question. But Piper takes a very different route. Alan explicitly states he didn't just stop Gutschall to save those specific lives, though, that was a good thing. He did it as a scientific test of the universe. He needed to know if the causal chain of events could be broken. And when Gutschall is locked up, Alan proves that time is not deterministic.
So he isn't fulfilling a loop, he is literally rewriting the sheet music.
Yes. He introduces a concept he calls a fan-shaped destiny. It's essentially an early conceptualization of quantum probability trees, or the multiverse.
Oh, like branching timeline.
Exactly. By changing one event, he doesn't just alter one outcome, he creates an entirely new line of probabilities. He adds a new, unprecedented factor to the causal chain. The universe branches off into a new direction.
And this realization gives Alan immense, incredible hope. He tells his father, with 30 years to work, I can stop a world war. I'll have the means to do it too.
By proving that a local murder can be prevented, he proves that global annihilation can be prevented.
I love this because this is where the story becomes deeply Chestertonian. Well, what I mean by that is G.K. Chesterton wrote extensively about the romance of the ordinary, the importance of localism, and the idea that grand, sweeping historical forces are actually kept in check by everyday people making small, virtuous choices.
Ah, I see.
Alan doesn't try to call the President of the United States. He doesn't try to build a superweapon. He stops a domestic murder in his hometown.
It is a beautiful, profoundly hopeful message about the dignity of the individual.
Yeah.
Civilization isn't necessarily saved by giant, sweeping government mandates or massive bureaucracies or unstoppable armies. It is saved by faithful, intelligent individuals taking moral responsibility for the knowledge they have, doing small things well.
Alan refuses to let history steamroll humanity. He realizes that if he can stop a local murder with a small action, he has 3 decades to dismantle the political and technological causes of World War III. He's taking personal responsibility for the fate of the world.
It's a highly empowering view of human virtue. It asserts that human choices matter on a cosmic scale.
Even small ones.
Especially small ones. Even if you are trapped in a 13-year-old body, your moral actions ripple out into eternity. You have the power to change the trajectory of the human race.
Let's zoom out for a minute. The 1950s was practically drowning in time travel stories.
Hmm.
It was a golden age for this specific trope.
Oh, absolutely.
So why does Time and Time Again hold up so well? I want to compare Piper's vision with some of the other titans of the genre to see why his specific philosophy was so unique.
It's a fascinating comparison. Let's start with the granddaddy of them all, H.G. Wells' The Time Machine, published in 1895.
Right, the Victorian era, the height of the Industrial Revolution.
Yes. In Wells's story, the protagonist is an archetypal Victorian scientist. He builds a physical machine of brass, ivory, and quartz.
Very steampunk.
Very. He travels hundreds of thousands of years into the future to the year 802,701. But why does he go there? Wells uses this distant future primarily as a canvas for social commentary on his own present.
The Eloi and the Morlocks.
Exactly. The division of humanity into the delicate surface-dwelling Eloi and the brutal subterranean working-class Morlocks is a direct, biting allegory for Victorian class inequality and the ultimate entropy of civilization.
Right. Wells is making a point about the wealthy elite and the working class of 1895. He's looking at capitalism and saying, if this goes unchecked, we literally split into two different species.
Yes.
Piper is doing something completely different. There is no physical machine and time again. It's entirely mental time travel. And Alan isn't traveling hundreds of thousands of years away to observe a grand sociological metaphor.
He's thrown a mere 30 years back to deal with immediate impending geopolitical doom.
Exactly. Wells is writing a sociological warning about class warfare. Piper is writing a tactical survival manual about nuclear warfare.
That's a great way to put it.
Okay, what about Ray Bradbury? His short story, A Sound of Thunder. It was published in 1952, right in the thick of the post-war era, and it's basically the origin of the butterfly effect in pop culture.
Bradbury's approach is totally different from Piper's. In A Sound of Thunder, a man named Eccles pays a massive sum to go on a time travel safari back to the late Cretaceous period to hunt a Tyrannosaurus rex.
I remember this one. They have to stay on the path, right?
Yes. The safari guides are meticulously, neurotically careful. They have built a floating anti-gravity path so no one ever touches the ground because they understand that altering even the smallest detail in the past, stepping on a mouse, crushing a plant, could have catastrophic compounding ripple effects on the future.
Because they view the timeline as incredibly fragile. It's chaos theory applied to history.
Yes, and Eccles panics when he sees the T-Rex. He steps off the path. He steps in the mud. When they return to their present, the year 2055, things are subtly, terrifyingly wrong.
The air smells different.
The spelling on a sign at the safari office has changed, and worst of all, a recent presidential election has flipped. Before they left, a moderate Democratic candidate named Keith had won. Now a fascist dictator named Deutscher is in power.
And Eccles looks at the bottom of his boot, and he finds a dead, crushed butterfly. One misstep, one accidental death of an insect millions of years ago, and the entire world falls to a dictator in 2055.
It's a huge shift.
And the guide, Travis, is so furious about the destruction of their timeline that he raises his rifle, and there is a sound of thunder, meaning he executes Eccles. It's incredibly bleak.
It is so bleak. Bradbury focuses on the fragility of existence and accidental catastrophic ripple effects. His message is almost like the timeline is a house of cards. Don't touch anything because you will ruin it. But Piper takes the exact opposite approach.
Right. Alan Hartley is all about intentional, targeted changes for the good. He doesn't step on a butterfly by accident and doom the world. He deliberately steps in to prevent a murder-suicide to test the waters of change, and he uses that knowledge to try and save the world.
Bradbury's characters are careless tourists who break the universe. Piper's character is a diligent mechanic trying to fix a broken engine.
That's a perfect metaphor. A mechanic fixing an engine. Now let's look at Isaac Asimov. His novel, The End of Eternity, came out in 1955, right around the exact time X-1 was broadcasting Piper's story.
Now, Asimov's take is fascinating because it's so institutional.
Yeah, tell us about that.
The End of Eternity is perhaps the ultimate exploration of institutional bureaucratic time travel. Asimov gives us an organization existing entirely outside of normal time called Eternity.
And the members are called Eternals.
Right. Our protagonist is a man named Andrew Harlan, and his job title is Technician. He specializes in implementing what they call reality changes.
Reality changes, I remember this. They literally run equations to calculate the minimum necessary change, the MNC, to alter history for the betterment of mankind. They treat the timeline like a massive spreadsheet.
Exactly. They travel up when and down when in temporal devices called kettles. Their entire goal is to maximize human happiness and safety by preventing disasters, wars, and suffering.
Sounds good on paper.
It does. They will erase entire subcultures or alter technological developments just to keep the human race safe and placid.
But Asimov shows the horrific cost of this safety. Because by constantly erasing struggle, hardship, and risk, the Eternals are inadvertently stifling human progress.
Yes, they prioritize absolute safety above all else, and in doing so, they prevent humanity from taking the risks necessary to reach the stars.
Right. Harlan falls in love with a non-Eternal woman named Noah's Lambent. She's from the Hidden Centuries, a time period where the Eternals are mysteriously blocked from entering.
And Noah's reveals the grim truth to Harlan.
She tells him that in every single timeline where eternity exists, humanity becomes stagnant. They value safety so much that they never invent space travel. When they finally do reach for the stars, thousands of years too late, other alien species have already claimed the galaxy. Humanity becomes depressed, retreats to Earth, and it eventually dies out.
It's a really chilling thought experiment.
So Noah's mission is to prevent eternity from ever being founded in the first place. She forces Harlan to make a massive philosophical choice: preserve the sterile, managed safety of eternity, or destroy the institution entirely and give humanity a chance to forge its own riskier but infinitely greater destiny.
And he chooses to destroy it.
He does. The book ends with the phrase, "the end of eternity and the beginning of infinity."
It's a brilliant critique of the post-WWII technocratic managerial state. Asimov is warning against handing our destiny over to bureaucrats who value safety over freedom.
Which is very different from Piper.
Oh, completely. Contrast that with Alan Hartley in Piper's story. Asimov's Eternals are like cold, calculated surgeons in a sterile operating room debating mathematical equations to alter the timeline.
While Piper's time traveler is incredibly intimately personal,
Yeah.
Alan isn't part of a massive agency existing outside of time. He's just a guy who woke up in his own childhood bed, realizing the house is going to catch fire in 30 years. He doesn't have an M&C calculation.
He doesn't have a kettle to travel up.
He just has a 13-year-old body, a loving father who is trying his best to understand, and his own sheer desperation.
It's the difference between a bureaucracy playing God from a distance and a single human being acting out of intimate moral courage on the ground.
Beautifully said.
Alan isn't trying to engineer a mathematically perfectly safe timeline for all of human history. He's just trying to stop a specific war that he knows will kill millions of people, including himself.
And I think that's why Piper's story feels so much more grounded and resonant today. As a listener, you can't really imagine being an eternal living outside of time running probability equations.
Not at all.
But you can easily imagine being a kid sitting at the kitchen table looking at your parents, trying to figure out how to convince them that the world is going to end.
That grounded emotional reality is exactly why this broadcast remains one of the finest examples of thoughtful golden age science fiction.
It really does.
It eschews the dizzying, paradox-driven gimmicks that you find in a lot of time travel stories. There's no worrying about meeting your past self and causing the universe to explode.
No agonizing over the grandfather paradox.
Right. Piper sidesteps all the cheap tricks.
Because Piper gives us something much better. He gives us a deeply emotional, psychologically rich story about a father, a son, and the immense moral courage required to change the fate of the world.
It's a story about taking personal responsibility for the future rather than assuming it's someone else's problem.
It serves as a potent reminder that we are all, in a very real sense, time travelers moving toward the future at a rate of 1 second per second.
That's a great perspective.
We don't have the luxury of Alan's perfect memory of what's to come, but we share the exact same responsibility to shape that future for the better. We are all making those small, ordinary, Chestertonian choices every single day. Choices that ripple out into the decades ahead. The future is built by the Frank Gutschall moments.
It absolutely is.
Which brings us to the end of our deep dive today. But before we sign off, I want to turn directly to you, the listener, and I want to bring this entirely back to you with a final, lingering thought.
Something to mull over.
We've spent this time talking about Alan Hartley waking up with all his adult knowledge in his 13-year-old body. We've talked about the urge to fix things, to change the timeline, to save the world from atomic fire. But let's bring it closer to home.
Let's scale it down to personal history rather than global history.
Exactly. I want you to mull this over maybe the next time you're driving, or doing the dishes, or looking at an old photograph. If you were given one opportunity right now to return to your own childhood bedroom with everything you know today, what would you change?
What mistakes would you undo?
What pain would you avoid? And perhaps more importantly, what would you leave exactly as it was?
That's the hard part.
Would you risk losing the person you've become today just to fix the mistakes of your past? If you pull one thread to fix a regret, do you unravel the relationships, the resilience, and the character you built by surviving it?
It is a profound, almost paralyzing question. The changes we desire in our past often carry costs in our present that we cannot possibly foresee.
It's definitely something to think about. We want to thank you for pulling up a chair and joining us here at Under the Hood.
Thanks for listening.
We warmly invite you to subscribe to Chesterton Radio, to support the little station on Commercial Street in Atchison, Kansas, and to join Chesterton Radio World. Because, as we've seen today, great stories, even those born from the atomic anxieties of the 1940s and 50s, still have something profoundly true and incredibly relevant to say about our modern world and our own lives. We'll save a seat at the table for you next time.